Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to some new members of our Patreon family: Sasha, Jason, Surly Mama, Brandy, and Not That Kind of Karen. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting Boring Books for Bedtime and learning more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes heard nowhere else, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight we're relaxing with a request from one of our very youngest listeners at 7 years old. And what she's requested is pretty perfect for this podcast, because if you've ever looked at our logo, you'll see a cat, a subject about which I've never read. So Robin, this one's for you. Tonight we're relaxing with our cats and all about them, their varieties, habits and management, and for show. The standard of excellence and beauty described and pictured by Harrison Weir, FRHS, in a new edition published by the Fancier's Gazette Limited, 54 to 57 Imperial Buildings, Ludgate Circus, London, in 1892. Let's begin. To my dear wife, I dedicate this book in token of my appreciation of her gentle and tender kindness towards all animal life, more particularly the cat. Preface to the original edition. The following notes and illustrations of and respecting the cat are the outcome of over 50 years' careful, thoughtful, heedful observation, much research, and not unprofitable attention to the facts and fancies of others. From a tiny child to the present, the love of nature has been my chief delight. Animals and birds have not only been objects of study, but of deep and absorbing interest. I have noted their habits, watched their ways, and found lasting pleasure in their companionship. This love of animal life and nature, with all its moods and phases, has grown with me from childhood to manhood, and is not the least enjoyable part of my old age. Among animals, possibly the most perfect, and certainly the most domestic, is the cat. I did not think so always, having had a bias against it, and was some time coming to this belief. Nevertheless, such is the fact. It is a veritable part of our household, and is both useful, quiet, affectionate, and ornamental. The small or large dog may be regarded and petted, but is generally useless. The cat, a pet or not, is of service. were it not for our cats, rats and mice would overrun our house, buildings, cultivated and other lands. If there were not millions of cats, there would be billions of vermin. Long ages of neglect, ill treatment, and absolute cruelty, with little or no gentleness, kindness, or training, have made the cat self-reliant, and from this emanates the marvelous powers of observation, the concentration of which has produced a state analogous to reasoning, not unmixed with timidity, caution, wildness, and a retaliative nature. But should a new order of things arise, and it is nurtured, petted, cosseted, talked to, noticed, and trained with mellowed firmness and tender gentleness, then in but a few generations much evil that bygone cruelty has stamped into its often wretched existence will disappear, and it will be more than ever not only a useful, serviceable helpmate, but an object of increasing interest, admiration, and cultured beauty, and thus being of value, profitable. Having said this much, I turn to the pleasurable duty of recording my deep sense of the kindness of those warm-hearted friends who have assisted me in my labor of love, not the least among these being those publishers who, with a generous and prompt alacrity, gave me permission to make extracts, excerpts, notes, and quotations from the following high-class works, their property. My best thanks are due to Messrs. Longmans & Co., Blaine's Encyclopedia of British Sports, Allen & Co., Reverend J. F. Thistleton Dyer's English Folklore, Castle & Company Limited, Dr. Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, and Old and New London, Messrs. Chatto and Windus, History of Signboards, Mr. J. Murray Jameson's Scottish Dictionary, and others. I am also indebted to Messrs. Walker and Bootle and the Phototype Company for the able manner in which they have rendered my drawings, and for the careful printing to my good friends, Messrs. Charles Dickens and Evans, Harrison Weir, Iddlesley, Sevenoaks, May 5th, 1889. Preface to the new edition. Some time has passed since I published my book, Our Cats and All About Them, in 1889, and much has taken place regarding these household pets. All know as well as myself that each and everything about us changes. Nothing stands still. That which is of today is past, and that which was hidden often revealed, sometimes by mere accident, at others by scientific research. But one was scarcely prepared in any way for so wonderful a find as that of the large number of mummy cats at Beni Hassan in central Egypt. They were discovered by an Egyptian fellah employed in husbandry, who tumbled into a pit, which on further examination proved to be a large subterranean cave completely filled with mummy cats, every one of which had been separately embalmed and wrapped in cloth, after the manner of the Egyptian human mummies, all being laid out carefully in rows. And here they had lain, probably about 3,000 or 4,000 years. The totem of a section of the ancients, as is well known, was the cat. Hence, when a cat died, it was buried with due honors, being embalmed, and often decorated in various ways, and in short had as much attention paid to it as a human being. It had long been believed that a cat cemetery existed on the east bank of the Nile, and in the autumn of 1889, the lucky Egyptian, about 100 miles from Cairo, came unexpectedly upon it. Immediately on the find becoming known, specimen mummy cats were written for to agents in Egypt, one friend of mine sending for 4, and it appeared for a while that much money would be realized by the owner of the cave or land in this way, but the number was too great, and the prices and the interest gave way, and sad to relate, these former deities were dug out of their resting place by hundreds of thousands and quickly sold to local farmers. Other lots found their way to an Alexandrian merchant and were by him sent to Liverpool on board the steamer Pharos and Thebes. The consignment consisted of 19½ tons and were sold by auction, mostly being bought by a local fertilizer merchant. The auction was only known to the trade, and the lots were knocked down at the giving away sums of £3 13 shillings 9 £3 17 shillings to £4 5 shillings per ton, the big and the perfect ones being picked out for the museum and private collections. I made several endeavors to find out from those on the spot at Liverpool whether there were any hair of colors in existence among the mass of bodies, but in no case could I succeed in getting any, as I had hoped by this means to possibly come to some conclusion as to the kind or breed. Of course, it is well known from mummies long in this country what form, size, and general appearance the Egyptian possessed. But as yet, as far as I can learn, no one has found so much, if any, of the fur as to be able to determine the color. In February of this year, 1891, my kind friend Mr. Dresser of Orpington, the well-known naturalist, wrote to me to know whether I would like to have a kitten half-bred between the British wildcat and a domestic she-cat, which I was unfortunately obliged to decline, fearing it would make matters unpleasant with what I had. He very kindly supplied me with the following particulars, forwarded to him by O. H. McThayer, Esquire. Mr. Harrison Weir can see the papa of the kitten at the zoo. He is a young cat, under a year old, we thought by the teeth. He was seen one moonlit night in company with my stalker's small, lean black cat. We caught the papa in a trap after he had killed a number of grouse, and not being badly hurt, I sent him to Bartlett at the zoo. We are thoroughly up to real wild cats here. I have caught them 43 inches from nose to tail end, tails as thick at the point as at the root. The ears are also differently set on. Marten cats, polecats, and badgers are all extinct here, and it is 10 years since we got the last wild cat, but 3 have been killed in this district this winter. I insert the foregoing as being of much interest, it having been frequently stated that the wild cat will not mate with the domestic cat. The kitten offered to me is now at Fawley Court. Among the numerous letters I have received from America is one from Mrs. Mary A. St. Livermore of Cambridge, Massachusetts, who writes, I have just come possessed of a black, long-haired cat from Maine. It is neither Persian, Angora, nor Indian. They are called here coon cats, and it is vulgarly supposed to be a cross between a common cat and a raccoon. Mine is a rusty bare brown color, but his relatives have been black and white, blue and white, and fawn and white, the latter the gentlest, prettiest cat I know. His tail is very bushy, and a fine ruff adorns his neck. A friend of mine has a pair of these cats, all black, and the female consorts with no one but her mate. Yet often she has in her litter a common short-haired kitten. Since the above reached me, I have received from another correspondent in the United States a very beautiful photograph of what is termed a coon cat. It certainly differs much from the ordinary long-haired cat in appearance, but as to its being a cross with the raccoon, such a supposition is totally out of the question, and the idea cannot be entertained. The photographs sent to me show that the ears are unusually large, the head long, the length being in excess from the eyes to the tip of the nose. The legs and feet are large and evenly covered with long, somewhat coarse hair, the latter being devoid of tufts between and at the extremity of the toes. There are no long hairs of any consequence, either within the ears or at their apex. The frill or mane is considerable, as is the length of the hair covering the body. The tail is rather short and somewhat thick, well covered with hair of equal length, and in shape like a fox's brush. The eyes are large, round, and full, with a wild, staring expression. Certainly the breed, however it may be obtained, is most interesting to the cat naturalist, and the color, as before stated, being peculiar, must of course attract the attention independently of its general appearance. Since the above was written, I have received the following letter from Mr. Henry Brooker, The Elms, West Midford, Massachusetts. After asking for information respecting cats of certain breeds, he says, I have had for a number of years a peculiar strain of long-haired cats. They come from the islands off the coast of Maine and are known in this country as coon cats. The belief is that they have been crossed with the raccoon. This, of course, is untrue. The inhabitants of these islands are seafaring people, and many years ago, someone on his vessel had a pair of long-haired cats from which the strain has sprung. There are a few short-haired cats on the island, as there is no communication with the mainland except by boat. I want to improve my strain and get finer hair than the cats now have. Yellow cats are the most popular kind here, and I have succeeded in producing cats of a rich mahogany color with brushes like a fox. They hunt in the fields with me, and my Scotch terriers and they are on the most friendly terms. This, as a corroboration of the foregoing letters and the photographs, is, I take it, eminently satisfactory. I have been shown a Siberian cat by Mr. Casting of Leadenhall Market. The breed is entirely new to me. It is a small female cat of a slaty blue color, rather short in body and legs. The head is small and much rounded, while the ears are of a medium size. The iris of the eyes is a deep golden color, which in contrast to the bluish color of the fur makes them to appear still more brilliant. The tail is short and thick, very much so at the base, and suddenly pointed at the tip. It is particularly timid and wild in its nature and is difficult to approach, but as Mr. Casting observed, this timidity may be because it does not understand our language, and does not know when it is called or spoken to. I think it would make a valuable cat to cross with some English varieties. A correspondent writes, "In your book on cats, you do not mention Norwegian cats. I was in Norway last year, and was struck by the cats being different to any I had ever seen, being much stouter built, with thick, close fur, mostly sandy, with stripes of dark yellow. I suppose I am to infer that both the sexes are of sandy yellow color. If so, I should say it is more a matter of selection than a new color. I find generally in the colder countries the fur is short, dense, and somewhat woolly, and as a rule, judging from the information that I am continually receiving, whole or entire colors predominate. Large cats are by some sought after. This, I take it, is a great mistake, the fairly medium-sized cat being much the handsomer of the two, and they are generally also devoid of that coarseness that is found apparent in the former, while small cats are extremely pretty, and I understand are not only likely to be in vogue, but are actually now being bred for their extreme prettiness. I have heard of some of these bantam cats being produced by that true and most excellent fancier, Mr. Herbert Young, who not only has produced a tortoiseshell tomcat on lines laid down by myself, but is also engaged in breeding more, and I have not the least doubt he will be most successful, he having so been in producing new colors, and some of the finest silver tabby short-haired cats as yet seen. These short-haired cats, in my opinion, far surpassing for beauty any long hair ever exhibited, and are certainly of a sweeter disposition. In my former edition of Our Cats, I wrote hopefully and expectantly of much good to be derived from the institution of the so-called National Cat Club, and of which I was then president. But I am sorry to say that none of those hopes or expectations have been realized, and I now feel the deepest regret that I was ever induced to be in any way associated with it. I do not care to go into particulars, further than to say I found the principal idea of many of its members consisted not so much in promoting the welfare of the cat as of winning prizes, and more particularly their own cat club medals, for which, though offered at public shows, the public were not allowed to compete, and when won by the members, in many cases the public were thoughtlessly misled by believing it was an open competition. I therefore felt it my duty to leave the club for that and other reasons. I have also left off judging of the cats, even at my old much-loved show at the Crystal Palace, because I no longer care to come into contact with such, quote, lovers of cats. I am very much in favor of the cats' homes. The one at Dublin, in which Miss Swift takes so much interest, the one in London, with Miss Mayhew working for it with the zeal of a true cat lover, and that where Mr. Colum is the manager. All deserve and have my sincerest and warmest approbation, sympathy, and support, standing out as they do in such bright contrast to those self-styled cat lovers, the National Cat Club. Harrison Weir, F.R.H.S., Iddesleigh, Sevenoaks, March 12, 1892. Our Cats and All About Them. Introductory. After a cat show at the Crystal Palace, I usually receive a number of letters requesting information. One asks, "What is a true tortoiseshell like?" Another, "What is a tabby?" And yet another, "What is a blue tabby?" One writes of the splendid disposition of his cat. Another asks how to cure a cat scratching the furniture, and so on. After much consideration, and also at the request of many, I have thought it best to publish my notes on cats, their ways, habits, instincts, peculiarities, usefulness, colors, markings, forms, and other qualities that are required as fitting subjects to exhibit at what is now one of the instituted exhibitions of the land we live in, and also the folk and other lore, both ancient and modern, respecting them. It is many years ago that when thinking of the large number of cats kept in London alone, I conceived the idea that it would be well to hold cat shows, so that the different breeds, colors, markings, etc., might be more carefully attended to, and the domestic cat, sitting in front of the fire, would then possess a beauty and an attractiveness to its owner, unobserved and unknown because uncultivated heretofore. Prepossessed with this view of the subject, I called on my friend Mr. Wilkinson, the then manager of the Crystal Palace. With his usual business-like clear-headedness, he saw it was a thing to be done. In a few days I presented my scheme in full working order, the schedule of prizes, the price of entry, the number of classes, and the points by which they would be judged, the number of prizes in each class, their amount, the different varieties of color, form, size, and sex for which they were to be given. I also made a drawing of the head of a cat to be printed in black on yellow paper for a posting bill. Mr. F. Wilson, the company's naturalist and show manager, then took the matter in charge, worked hard, got a goodly number of cats together, among which was my blue tabby, the old lady, then about 14 years old, yet the best in the show of its color and never surpassed, though lately possibly equaled. To my watch chain I have attached the silver bell she wore at her debut. My brother John Jenner Weir, the Reverend J. McDonough, and myself acted as judges, and the result was a success far beyond our most sanguine expectations, so much so that I have made it a labor of love of the feline race, and acting without fee, gratuity, or reward, the Crystal Palace Company generously presented me with a large silver tankard in token of their high approval of my exertions on behalf of the company and cats. Now that a cat club is formed, shows are more numerous and the entries increasing. There is every reason to expect a permanent benefit in every way to one of the most intelligent of, though often much abused, animals. The first cat show. On the day for judging, at Ludgate Hill I took a ticket and the train for the Crystal Palace. Sitting alone in the comfortable cushioned compartment of a first class, I confess I felt somewhat more than anxious as to the issue of the experiment. Yes, what would it be like? Would there be many cats? How many? How would the animals comport themselves in their cages? Would they sulk or cry for liberty, refuse all food, or settle down and take the situation quietly and resignedly, or give way to terror. I could in no way picture to myself the scene. It was all so new. Presently, and while I was musing on the subject, the door was opened and a friend got in. "Ah," said he, "how are you?" "Tolerably well," said I. "I am on my way to the cat show." "What?" said my friend. "That surpasses everything. A show of cats. Why, I hate the things. I drive them off my premises when I see them. You'll have a fine bother with them in their cages. Or are they to be tied up? Anyway, what a noise there will be, and how they will clutch at the bars and try and get out." "I am sorry, very sorry," said I, "that you do not like cats. For my part, I think them extremely beautiful, also very graceful in all their actions, and they are quite as domestic in their habits as the dog, if not more so. They are very useful in catching rats and mice. They are not deficient in sense. They will jump up at doors to push up latches with their paws. I have known them knock at a door by the knocker when wanting admittance. They know Sunday from the weekday, and do not go out to wait for the meat barrow on that day. They— "Stop," said my friend. "I see you do like cats, and I do not, so let the matter drop." "No," said I, "not so. That is why I instituted this cat show. I wish everyone to see how beautiful a well cared for cat is, and how docile, gentle, and, may I use the term, cossetty. Why should not the cat that sits purring in front of us before the fire be an object of interest, and be selected for its color, markings, and form? Now come with me, my dear old friend, and see the first cat show." Inside the Crystal Palace stood my friend and I. Instead of the noise and struggles to escape, there lay the cats in their different pens, reclining on crimson cushions, making no sound save now and then a homely purring, as from time to time they lapped the nice new milk provided for them. Yes, there they were, big cats, very big cats, middling-sized cats, and small cats, cats of all colors and markings, and beautiful, pure white Persian cats. And as we passed down the front of the cages, I saw that my friend became interested. Presently he said, "What a beauty this is, and here's another." "And no doubt," said I, "many of the cats you have seen before would be quite as beautiful if they were as well cared for, or at least cared for at all. Generally they are driven about and ill-fed, and often ill-used, simply for the reason that they are cats and for no other. Yet I feel a great pleasure in telling you the show would have been much larger were it not for the difficulty of inducing the owners to send their pets from home, though you see the great care that is taken of them." "Well, I had no idea there was such a variety of form, size, and color," said my friend, and he departed. A few months after I called on him. He was at luncheon with 2 cats on a chair beside him, pets, I should say, from their appearance. This is not a solitary instance of the good of the first cat show in leading up to the observation of and kindly feeling for the domestic cat. Since then, throughout the length and breadth of the land, there have been cat shows, and much interest is taken in them by all classes of the community, so much so that large prices have been paid for handsome specimens. It is to be hoped that by these shows, the too often despised cat will meet with the attention and kind treatment that every dumb animal should have and ought to receive at the hands of humanity. Even the few instances of the shows generating a love for cats that have come before my own notice are a sufficient pleasure to me not to regret having thought out and planned the first cat show at the Crystal Palace. Habits. Before attempting to describe the different varieties, I should like to make a few remarks as to the habits and ways of the domestic cat. When judging, I have frequently found some of the exhibits of anything but a mild and placid disposition. Some have displayed a downright ferocity. Others, on the contrary, have been excessively gentle, and very few but seem to recognize their position and submitted quietly to their confinement. This is easily accounted for when persons are accustomed to cats. They know what wonderful powers of observation the cat possesses, and how quickly they recognize the why and the wherefore of many things. Take, for instance, how very many cats will open a latched door by springing up and holding on with one foreleg, while with the other they press down the latch catch, and so open the door. And yet even more observant are they than that, as I have shown by a case in my Animal Stories Old and New, in which a cat opened a door by pulling it towards him, when he found pushing it of no avail. The cat is more critical in noticing than the dog. I never knew but one dog that would open a door by moving the fastening without being shown or taught how to do it. Cats that have done so are numberless. I noticed one at the last Crystal Palace show, a white cat. It looked up, it looked down, then to the right and then a little to the left, paused, seemed lost in thought. When not seeing anyone about, it crept up to the door and with its paw tried to pull back the bolt or catch. On getting sight of me, it retired to a corner of the cage, shut its eyes, and pretended to sleep. I stood further away and soon saw the paw coming through the bars again. This cat had noticed how the cage door was fastened, and so knew how to open it. Many cats that are said to be spiteful are made so by ill treatment, for as a rule, I have found them to be most affectionate and gentle, and that to the last degree, attaching themselves to individuals, although such is stated not to be the case, yet of this I am certain. Having had several in my house at one time, I found that no two were the followers of the same member of the family. But it may be argued, and I think with some degree of justice, why was this? Was it only that each cat had a separate liking? If so, why? Why should not 3 or 4 cats take a liking to the same individual? But they seldom or never do. And for that matter, there seems somewhat the same feeling with dogs. This required some consideration, but that not of long duration, for I am sorry to say I rapidly came to the conclusion that it was jealousy. Yes, jealousy. There was no doubt about it. Zeno would be very cossetty, loving, lovable, and gentle. But when Lulu came in and was nursed, he retired to a corner and seized the first opportunity of vanishing through the door. As soon as Zilla jumped on my knee and put her paws about my neck, Lulu looked at me, then at her, then at me, walked to the fire, sat down, looked round, got up, went to the door, cried to go out. The door was opened and she fled. I thought that Zilla seemed then more than ever happy. Though jealousy is one of, if not the ruling attributes of the cat, there are exceptions to such a rule. Sometimes it may be that two or more will take to the same person. As an instance of this, I had two cats, one a red tabby, a great beauty, Lilla, a short-haired red and white cat. The latter and a white long-haired one named the Colonel were great friends, and these associated with a tortoiseshell and white, Lizzie. None of these were absolutely house cats, but attended more to the poultry yard and run, looking after the chickens, seeing that no rats were about or other vermin near the coops. Useful cats, very. Mine was then a very large garden, and generally of an evening when at home, I used to walk about the numerous paths to admire the beauties of the different herbaceous plants, of which I had an interesting collection. 5 was my time of starting on my ambulation, when on going out of the door, I was sure to find the 2 first-named cats, and often the 3rd, waiting for me, ready to go wherever I went, following like faithful dogs. These apparently never had any jealous feeling. Of all the cats, Lilla was the most loving. If I stood still, she would look up and watch the expression of my face. If she thought it was favorable to her, she would jump, and clinging to my chest, put her forepaws around my neck and rub her head softly against my face, purring melodiously all the time, then move on to my shoulder, while the Colonel and his tortoiseshell friend Lizzie would press about my legs, uttering the same musical, self-complacent sound. Here, there, and everywhere, even out into the road or into the wood, the pretty things would accompany me, seeming intensely happy. When I returned to the house, they would scamper off, bounding in the air, and playing with and tumbling over each other in the fullest and most frolicsome manner imaginable. No, I do not think that Lilla, the Colonel, or Lizzie ever knew the feeling of jealousy. But these, as I said before, were exceptions. I have ever regretted the loss of the gentle Lilla. She was as beautiful as she was good, gentle and loving, without a fault. It may have been noted in the foregoing, I have said that my cats were always awaiting my coming. Just so. The cat seems to take note of time as well as place. At my townhouse, I had a cat named Guadalquiver, which was fed on meat brought to the door. Every day during the week he would go and sit ready for the coming of the meat man. But he never did so on the Sunday. How it was he knew on that day that the man did not come, I never could discover. Still, the fact remains. How he, or whether he, counted the days until the 6th, and then rested the 7th from his watching is still a mystery. A similar case is related of an animal belonging to Mr. Trubner, the London publisher. The cat, a gigantic one and a pet of his, used to go every evening to the end of the terrace, on which was the house where he resided, to escort Mr. Trubner back to dinner on his arrival from the city, but was never once known to make the mistake of going to meet him on Sundays. And again, how well a cat knows when it is luncheon time. He or she may be apparently asleep on the tiles or snugly lying under a bush, basking in the sun's warm rays, when it will look up, yawn, stretch itself, get up and move leisurely towards the house, and as the luncheon bell rings, in walks the cat, as ready for food as any there. Most cats are of a gentle disposition, but resent ill treatment in a most determined way, generally making use of their claws, at the same time giving vent to their feelings by a low growl and spitting furiously. Under such conditions it is best to leave off that which has appeared to irritate them. Dogs generally bite when they lose their temper, but a cat seldom. Should a cat dig her claws into your hand, never draw it backward, but push forward. You thus close the foot and render the claws harmless. If otherwise, you generally lose 3 to 4 pieces of skin from your hand. The cat knows he has done it and feels revenged. Some cats do not like their ears touched, others their backs, others their tails. I have one now, Fritz. He has such a great dislike to having his tail touched that if we only point to it and say tail, he growls, and if repeated, he will get up and go out of the room, even though he was enjoying the comfort of his basket before a good fire. By avoiding anything that is known to tease an animal, no matter what, it will be found that is the true way, combined with gentle treatment and oft caressing, to tame and to make them love you, even those whose temper is none of the best. This is equally applicable to horses, cows, and dogs as to cats. Gentleness and kindness will work wonders with animals, and I take it is not lost on human beings. The distance cats will travel to find and regain the home they have been taken from is surprising. One my groom begged of me, as he had had no cat at home, and he was fond of the dear thing, but he really wanted to be rid of it, as I found out afterwards. He took the poor animal away in a hamper, and after carrying it some 3 miles through London streets, threw it into the Surrey Canal. That cat was sitting wet and dirty outside the stable when he came in the morning, and went in joyfully on his opening the door, ran up to and climbed on the back of its favorite, the horse, who neighed a welcome home. The man left that week. Another instance, and I could give you many more, but this will suffice. It is said that if you wish an old cat to stay, you should have the mother with the kitten or kittens, but this sometimes fails to keep her. Having a fancy for a beautiful brown tabby, I purchased her and kitten from a cottager living 2.5 miles away. The next day I let her out, keeping the kitten in a basket before the fire. In half an hour, mother and child were gone, and though she had to carry her little one through woods, hedgerows, across grass and arable fields, she arrived home with her young charge quite safely the following day, though evidently very tired, wet, and hungry. After 2 days she was brought back, and being well fed and carefully tended, she roamed no more. The cat, like many other animals, will often form singular attachments. One would sit in my horse's manger and purr and rub against his nose, which undoubtedly the horse enjoyed, for he would frequently turn his head purposely to be so treated. One went as consort with a Dorking cock. Another took a great liking to my collie Rover. Another loved Lena the cow, while another would cosset up close to a sitting hen and allowed the fresh-hatched chickens to seek warmth by creeping under her. Again, they will rear other animals such as rats, rabbits, squirrels, puppies, hedgehogs, and when motherly inclined, will take to almost anything, even to a young pigeon. At the Brighton show of 1886 there were 2 cats, both reared by dogs, the foster mother and her bantling showing evident signs of sincere affection. There are both men and women who have a decided antipathy to cats, won't have one in the house on any account. They are called deceitful, and some go as far as to say treacherous, but how and in what way I cannot discover. Others, on the contrary, love cats beyond all other things domestic. Of course, cats, like other animals, or even human beings, are very dissimilar, no two being precisely alike in disposition, any more than are to be found 2 forms so closely resembling as not to be distinguished one from the other. To some, a cat is a cat, and if all were black, all would be alike, but this would not be so in reality, as those well know who are close observers of animal and bird life. Of course, the gamekeeper has a dislike to cats, more especially when they take to the woods, but so long as they are fed and keep within bounds, they are useful in scaring away rats from the young broods of pheasants. What are termed poaching cats are clearly outlaws, and must be treated as such. And with that conclusion of the Habits chapter, I think we'll end this evening's reading from Our Cats and All About Them. As a lifelong cat lover, I'm really enjoying this, and I hope you do too. If you'd like to read this work for yourself and see the illustrations, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.